Welcome to episode 114 of Angela Watson's Truth for Teachers. I'm your host, Angela Watson, and I'm here to speak life, encouragement, and truth into the minds and hearts of educators and get you energized for the week ahead. Today, I'm sharing 7 ways teachers can push past self-doubt and imposter syndrome. Visit truthforteachers.com to get a transcript of this episode or to share your thoughts in the comments. See if you can relate to any of these statements. I have no idea what I'm doing as a teacher. My principal was crazy to hire me for this position. I'm clearly not experienced enough. I'm not knowledgeable enough about the subject area to be teaching it. I'm just not capable of doing everything that needs to be done as a teacher. I don't know why other people say I'm such a good teacher. I really don't deserve the compliment, and I haven't done a very good job. If you can relate to any of those statements, you might be dealing with a phenomenon that's commonly known as imposter syndrome. It's that feeling of being a fraud, an almost panic-inducing sense that at any moment, other people are going to figure out that you have absolutely no idea what you're doing and you have no business being given the level of responsibility that you have. This is a real thing, and it can be paralyzing. If you struggle with imposter syndrome, you may find that it's gotten worse in recent years because of social media, where we see or we think we're seeing what other people's lives are like, and we inadvertently begin comparing ourselves to them. We wonder, how come my home doesn't look like that? How come my classroom doesn't look like that? How come my family and my students don't act like that? Everyone else is being a responsible grown-up and I'm over here struggling with basic adulting. I can't even remember to get my teeth cleaned every 6 months. How am I in charge of running an entire classroom? Imposter syndrome is something that I personally have struggled with, and I talked about that, especially in relation to social media, back in the beginning of the podcast season, in episode 101. It was called Your Classroom Does Not Have to Be Pinterest-Worthy. And I talked about how I struggled with imposter syndrome as a teacher, even back before Pinterest pressure was even a thing. Here's what imposter syndrome looked like for me as a teacher. I always had back to school nightmares every single year, and they would involve the kids running wild. They would literally not see me in the classroom. It was like I was there and I didn't exist. Because subconsciously, I worried that I had no idea how to manage a classroom, despite having literally written the book on classroom management. And I'd go through experiences where I'd be having a lesson observed. And the day before I would think, well, I guess this is it. My principal is going to realize now I don't actually know how to teach and I've just been faking it for the last 10 years. Or I'd have a back to school night and I would think, this is going to be the night. This is when all the parents are going to realize I have no idea what I'm doing and I'm not nearly as good of a teacher as the one that their child had last year. In truth, I never really felt like I had a firm grasp on what every student in the classroom knew and was able to do at all times. And I felt like I should. I was just doing my best to keep up every day. And because I didn't feel like I really had a good handle on that all the time, I felt like an imposter. I felt like I really didn't know what I was doing as a teacher. That kind of self-doubt was always with me. I didn't feel it every single moment, but it was something that was sort of always lurking around the corner. I never knew when it would crop up, and it's never left me even now. Imposter syndrome isn't something that I grapple with as often anymore, but I would say it still happens on a very regular basis. Sometimes the moments of imposter syndrome are fleeting and I can just brush them out of my mind in a few seconds, but other times they will loom over me for hours or even days. They're just these moments of self-doubt in which I feel like I have nothing new or original to say to the world. So why even bother putting my ideas out there? I had imposter syndrome actually creating this episode. Like, this is so dumb. No one is going to be able to relate to this. Actually, this whole podcast is dumb. My teaching resources are dumb. It feels like everything that I want to do or make has already been done. Everything has already been said, and someone else has already said and done it better. Who am I to think that I have ideas that are worth sharing with other people? I worry that any day now, people are going to decide I'm a fake and a phony who has no idea what she's talking about. So I hope that makes you feel a little bit better. Not in the sense that I actually have solutions that can make imposter syndrome go away once and for all. But I do have solutions that come from personal experience that I know have made it easier for me personally to grapple with it. And I'm going to share those strategies with you today to help you manage your own self-doubt, assuming that it's not just me who's going through this. I've chosen 7 specific things that have been helpful for me over the years, and I hope that they will be helpful for you too. The first thing to know is that self-doubt is a natural part of being self-reflective and wanting to be your very best. Anyone who's analyzing their work and striving to be better is going to feel like an imposter at times. Reflecting on your shortcomings is an important part of growth and improvement. You have to do that, so don't shy away from it just because you're worried that you're not going to measure up. Instead, recognize that imposter syndrome is normal and it's likely going to creep up from time to time. It's something that people in all walks of life have struggled with, particularly women, and particularly those in service-oriented and creative fields. Even the most successful and accomplished people that we know have admitted to feeling like they aren't doing enough and aren't good enough. And I'm going to share a few quotes that when I heard them, I thought, wow, okay, this really isn't just me. Listen to this quote. "There are still days when I wake up feeling like a fraud, not sure that I should be where I am." That was said by Sheryl Sandberg, the COO of Facebook. Here's another one. "I've written 11 books, but each time I think, uh-oh, they're going to find out now. I've run a game on everybody and they're going to find me out." That was said by author and speaker Maya Angelou. Here's another. "I still think people will find out that I'm not very talented. I'm not very good. It's all been a big sham." That was actress Michelle Pfeiffer. "Sometimes I wake up in the morning before going off to a shoot and I think, I can't do this. I'm a fraud." That's actress Kate Winslet. Here's one more. "There are an awful lot of people out there who think that I'm an expert. How do these people believe all this about me? I'm so much aware of all the things that I don't know." That was Dr. Margaret Chan, the former chief of the World Health Organization. So if these women are grappling with that, you should know for sure that even the best in their fields grapple with imposter syndrome. It just means that you're wanting to be your best self. You're aware, as Dr. Chan said, of all the things that you don't know. That's a lot of self-awareness to see that, and that's what can create this imposter syndrome. It's just part of wanting to be your best and always wanting to learn. So accept that. It's as being part of your own growth and improvement. And once you've accepted that, you can plan more strategies for countering it. One thing that's been really helpful for me is to observe those imposter syndrome triggers and observe the imposter syndrome thoughts without judgment. So when you feel self-doubt taking over, the least helpful approach is to get even further down on yourself and to start feeling bad about feeling bad. Remember that imposter syndrome is a normal feeling, so don't judge yourself for it or set up some sort of unrealistic expectation that you should never ever feel that way. Instead, train yourself to simply be aware of what's happening. Pay attention to the things, the ideas, the people who inadvertently cause you to doubt yourself. Notice the feelings and tell yourself, something in this situation is triggering feelings of self-doubt. I'm feeling a little bit like a fraud right now. But just because I'm thinking and feeling this way in the moment doesn't mean that it's true or that I need to give any consideration or credence to those thoughts. I'm just going to observe that it's happening. I'm going to notice how I'm thinking and feeling, and I'm going to let those thoughts and feelings pass on their own. They always do. You can use feelings of self-doubt to help you experiment with teaching styles until you figure out which one is right for you. When you're feeling like a fraud as a teacher, that's a cue that you might be doing something that isn't an authentic expression of who you are. As a new teacher, I was constantly looking for effective strategies to emulate. And so for me, that meant trying out different personas, from the strict veteran teacher next door who didn't let the kids get away with anything, to the soft-spoken teacher downstairs who corrected every misbehavior with a song and a hug. I imitated all kinds of other teachers. I took little bits and pieces from different people's teaching styles. And naturally, I felt like an imposter at times because none of them were like me. I didn't yet know who I was in the classroom. I was still trying to figure out my own teaching identity. As a teenager, I went through lots of phases. I was one of those teenagers who just completely changed how they looked and dressed every 6 months because I just wasn't quite sure which persona was really me. And I had to go through that same process again as a teacher. Fortunately, without the manic panic hair dye that time around. And if you want to hear more about the mistakes that I made in this area, check out season 2, episode 7. It's called How to Find and Embrace Your Unique Teaching Style. So I've found that trial and error is sort of a requirement when you're trying to discover that special sauce that you alone can bring to the classroom. And even then, best practices are always evolving, and your personality and preferences change too. It's important to be willing to experiment and grow and adapt, even when that process induces imposter syndrome, because that is how you become an expert in your craft. Another thing that you can do that will really help counter imposter syndrome when it crops up is to accept that it is impossible to please everyone, and to use criticism as an opportunity to reflect on why you've made your choices. There's a saying that you could be the juiciest, sweetest peach in the orchard, and there's still going to be somebody who walks past you with a turned up nose because they don't like peaches. For me, grappling with imposter syndrome has meant accepting that not everyone is going to like me, and not everyone is going to like and respect my work. I am 100% positive that there are people out there who feel like my teaching, my advice, my books, my 40-hour teacher workweek club, my podcast even, are really not very good or just not very original. I know those people exist because some of them feel the need to email me or comment on my social media and say so from time to time. It doesn't happen often, but when I hear things like, this is nonsense, this is not going to work for me, or this isn't anything that I haven't already heard a million times before, it's easy for me to read that and just start doubting my own abilities. And I think that is just part of the price that you pay for being in a position as a leader. And that includes leadership as a classroom teacher. Not everyone is going to like what you do. Some principals will watch your best lessons and still be unimpressed. Some students and parents are going to dislike you no matter what. Some of your colleagues will disagree with the way that you manage your classroom and teach your lessons. There are people who are going to look at how you set up your classroom that you think is so amazing and so perfect and so beautiful, and they're going to think, not impressed. Embracing the fact that not everything is for everybody will help you move past feelings of being a fraud. Try to be open to the critique and self-reflect. So ask yourself questions like these. Ask yourself, what is the grain of truth in what the person is saying that is worth me holding on to, even while you disregard the part that isn't helpful? How can you use the situation to your benefit and as an opportunity for growth? And do you have a solid rationale for why you're making the choices you're making? If so, practice articulating it. If not, dig deeper to uncover whether your choice was the right one or if this is an opportunity to go in a different direction. You see, when you are firmly grounded in the why behind your choices and you're honest with yourself about your shortcomings, you can confront imposter syndrome without trying to wait until every person approves of and is impressed with your work. Some people will not like what I do, but if I can use their critique to help me figure out where I need to improve, I'm less likely to feel like a fraud, because then I can respond with honesty. Thanks for pointing that out. You're right. That's something I should take a look at. And when the critique is not valid, it's still an opportunity for self-reflection. It's a chance to reflect and make sure that my words and my actions are aligned with what I really believe. I found that when you have truly analyzed your decisions and you know you're making the right ones, you're not going to feel so much like a fraud when someone questions you or criticizes you, and you can rebound from imposter syndrome a lot more quickly. Now, let's talk about what happens when imposter syndrome crops up during your instruction. That tends to happen a lot because kids are like little authenticity detectors. They can tell when you're being fake, and their facial expressions will let you know if they're not buying what you're selling. So my advice is to be honest with your students when you don't know what you're doing. Just level with them. Tell them, I want to try out something that I saw online, and I'm not sure if it's going to work, but it would make this lesson better, and I thought it was worth trying out. So let's give it a go, and then afterward, we can talk about if the activity is something that you want to try again, and if so, how we can improve it together. I'm telling you from personal experience, kids really respect this kind of transparency from their teachers. And it actually gets them very excited about the lesson because they're thinking about it in a critical way. They're actually analyzing the lesson to think about what's working and what's not. It's really kind of cool to see. And saying things to kids like, I don't know, let's figure it out together. That's preferable to just making up an answer. So you can be honest when you need to Google something that the kids ask about. You can model that as a problem-solving strategy. So let the kids see, what do you do when you don't know something? Use the LCD projector to let them see the exact phrase that you type into search and how you figure out which result is accurate. So model that for kids. Model that transparency of saying, I don't know, this is going to be an experiment. Let's try it. Or I don't know, let's Google this together. Let's try to figure this out together. Let's see if we can put our minds together and figure out the solution. You can even let the kids know which units are your weakest and the hardest for you to teach. And you can model how you're overcoming that challenge. My students knew that I struggled with science and that I knew hardly anything about the solar system before becoming a third grade teacher. And we brainstormed ways that I could become more knowledgeable. And I shared my learning with them. So for example, I would let them know if I found a good documentary on TV the night before, and I'd shared some new nugget of information that I picked up. They loved learning alongside me. It was like their favorite thing to be like, Mrs. Watson, did you know? And then hear me say sincerely that I had not known and that they taught me something. You see, when you drop this persona as the grown-up in charge who knows everything, and you are instead positioning yourself as a fellow learner, you don't have to fake your way through the day as much. And imposter syndrome is easier to manage. I think it's also important to have a colleague who will help you with this. I like to think of someone who's willing to be an imposter syndrome co-conspirator. So this is a teacher that you can be vulnerable with and that you can admit when you have no idea what you're doing. It's a co-conspirator in fighting imposter syndrome because you can equip each other with the information that's needed to feel more competent. So instead of showing up to a meeting and feeling totally out of your depth, you can go to your co-conspirator and say, I'm having an imposter syndrome moment. I am clueless about what I'm supposed to say at this meeting. Can you help me figure out a couple key things that are going to help me feel more prepared? Now, if you're wondering how to find a person like that you can go to when you're feeling like a fraud, I would say the best way is by being that person for someone else. Other teachers are more likely to be vulnerable and transparent with you when you are that way with them. We all know teachers who are brutally honest and real, and we are just drawn to them like magnets, right? Here's what you can do. Try opening up at a team meeting about a minor issue that you're struggling with, and watch the reactions of the effective teachers who you really respect. Which person immediately latches on and chimes in with his or her own struggles? That is your imposter syndrome co-conspirator. The final tip that I want to give you is to change your self-talk so that imposter syndrome propels you to be even better. Choose to fight that imposter syndrome each time it crops up. Actively push against the internal voice that says, you're not good enough. You need to do more. And remind yourself, I am enough. My efforts are enough. I have a limited amount of time and energy, and I choose to channel my resources into doing the best job that is sustainable for me, regardless of what everyone else is doing. My room and my lessons don't have to be quote unquote perfect, and they will improve over time as I get feedback from my students and I learn from them what's most impactful. I'm going to just stay focused on the kids and focused on streamlining the learning process, because if I do that, I can't go wrong. Teaching yourself to think in this way, changing your self-talk is really, really crucial. And it's a big part of the reason why I partner with Dan Tricarico to create Finally Free, the teacher toolkit for conquering anxiety and overwhelm. You can check out the episode prior to this one, episode 113, if you want to learn more about how we design the toolkit to help you change the way you think about your work so that it feels less stressful and overwhelming. But I want you to listen to the first module of the toolkit now. You can download it for free. It's called Freedom from Comparison. And you can listen to it when you're feeling not good enough and you're comparing yourself to others. So I think it's the perfect follow-up to this episode. Go to finallyfreetoolkit.com and you can get it there. There's an audio lesson from Dan and I, and there's also a PDF transcript and some reflection questions and exercises that will help you work through imposter syndrome via the lens of freeing yourself from comparison to others. So it's at finallyfreetoolkit.com, and I think it's going to be an amazing resource that you can listen to over and over again. Anytime you're feeling not good enough, you can come back to that module of the toolkit and listen to an encouraging message that will help you change your self-talk. Your takeaway truth for the week ahead is this: it's not who you are that holds you back. It's who you think you're not. You have the ability to confront imposter syndrome. Plan for it. Be prepared with these 7 strategies when the feeling of being an imposter pops up, because feeling like a fraud will hold you back from taking risks. Figuring out a process to manage imposter syndrome is the only way you will ever do anything great. So change your self-talk. Learn how to practice believing in yourself so that you can keep sharing your gifts with the world. Let your fears inspire you to do better and become the best person you can be. It's not going to be easy. It's going to be worth it. Truth for Teachers is a proud member of the Education Podcast Network. Podcasts for educators, podcasts by educators. For more great podcast recommendations, go to edupodcastnetwork.com. That's edupodcastnetwork.com.